All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the second session. We've already had a very nice first session this morning. I'd like to continue the session with our invited speaker, Jelle de Plaa. So Jelle studied astrophysics at Utrecht University from 1998 to 2002 and did his PhD at SRON, the Space Research Institute in the Netherlands, from 2002 to 2007. He is currently employed as Senior Software Design Engineer in the Astrophysics program at SRON. In 2020, he played a big role in introducing an open science policy at SRON. So today he's going to tell us about how we can make research accessible and reproducible at our institutes. Go ahead, Jelle. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Yeah, you say like, how do we do this? Well, we were faced with this question about 2 years ago, and we are still trying to make the best of it. But I think it would be interesting for you to hear how we tackled this question, what things we initiated in our institute to move towards more reproducible science results for our scientists, which is not really easy. We're still improving things, but the question, how do you get started? What do you need to do in your institute to move towards more reproducible science? That's what I want to talk to you about, at least how we did it. I'm not sure we did it in the best way, but anyway, this is a talk intended to show what you can do in practice to move towards open science. In this talk, I will first introduce our institute SRON a little bit. What do we do? Which science do we do? Astronomy is a big part of it, but we also do other things. How did we start with open data? We actually have an open data policy since about 2 years. And how did we encourage our scientists to adhere to this policy? Of course, that gave all kinds of struggles, problems, things to solve. So at the end, I will share a number of lessons that we learned in this process and some recommendations for people who want to start this, and also recommendations to the community, like what do we need from the community to do this even better than we are doing now. This is, well, our institute, SRON, is a Dutch, the Netherlands Institute for Space Research. We have an institute that does science from space, which is mainly focused on one part, astrophysics. We mainly do infrared and submillimeter astrophysics from space observatories, and X-ray and gamma ray astronomy. Both you need to go to space because it doesn't pass through the atmosphere. We also have an exoplanet division since a couple of years. And on the other side, we also have Earth science, so Earth observation. We observe the Earth atmosphere, measure the molecules in the atmosphere, molecules that cause global warming like methane, also carbon monoxide. These kind of measurements we are doing from space. We're not only doing the science itself, but we are also building the instruments enabling the science. So we have astronomers there, we have earth scientists, and we have engineers and experimental physicists actually who build the instruments themselves. We put them on the satellite, and from the data we learn again how to make our instruments better. Everything is kind of in one institute, and you can imagine that these are generating lots of different types of data. There are many different tools around to deal with this data. So how to make this data open is sometimes quite a challenge. So how did we get started with open science? Actually, this was encouraged by our funding agency. Our funding agency is NWO, the Netherlands kind of science foundation. There's not a good translation in English, I think, for the NWO abbreviation. And NWO is basically our science funder who funds individual scientists, but also has a number of institutes in different fields, like SRON, to kind of build the infrastructure needed for doing the science. So SRON builds instruments for scientific satellites to make astronomy possible in a way. NWO already since 2015 was very involved in open data, open science, open access as well. And in 2019, or at least somewhat before, they put in their strategy that they really wanted to get started with open science in the Netherlands, together with Dutch universities and the Dutch Ministry of Education and Science. They came to the strategy: we want to implement open science in Dutch science. So, answering to that strategy, our institute also formulated its own open data policy, which is basically a data management plan. So how will we deal with the data, and how will we make it open? How will we make it reproducible, etc. This policy came into effect early 2020. This is kind of coincided with the COVID pandemic. So the introduction of the policy was not going as fast as we planned due to all the lockdowns and all the things. But anyway, we started, and we have some things done now 2 years later that I can share with you, like how far we are now. So this data management plan, this SRON policy, I won't go through the entire document with you, but what was kind of the first step that people took was, okay, what kind of data do we actually have in the institute, and what are we responsible for? Because we use quite a lot of data from satellite missions, can be Earth science missions, can be astronomy missions, from missions like XMM Newton or Chandra or Herschel. JWST will also come in the near future, hopefully. And these data, these raw data, are not generated by us. They are, in principle, the responsibility of NASA and ESA, and we are only the users of these data. So in this respect, we cannot do much as an institute. Then we have type B data that we identified, and this data generated in the institute. So if we are testing instruments, doing new experiments, this generates data, and we said, like, okay, projects who are doing this, usually instrumentation projects, are responsible to make this data open at some point. Then type C data, and that's the most interesting for astronomers, is kind of the data that you derive from the satellite data, from the observatories that you use. And so all your data analysis process that you use in publications, that is a next step that we need to do to make these data open as well. So not only the data, but also the software and scripts. And the question is, how do we do that? So this is, I will mainly talk in this talk about type C data, because that is the most interesting to look at in this community. So yeah, you can top-down push a kind of policy onto scientists, but how do you prepare the people? And you cannot just send out an email, okay, from now on we do open data, good luck. So we need to do something to help the scientists change their way of working to accommodate open science and make their way of working more reproducible. So how did we start that? One of the first things that we actually did was creating a group of data stewards. So a couple of mostly volunteers from the institute, from the different departments that we have, who like programming, like tools, are interested in the topic, and kind of combine them in a group and kind of make them responsible for running a kind of help desk, or to act as a kind of a knowledge base for researchers to to go to if they have a data analysis problem, an open data problem, whatever. So we created that group, and it happened to be that I'm now a coordinator of this group, and we are now busy for 2 years to prepare the scientists and change their way, the way they work. So after that, we started organizing talks about open data, similar to what was discussed in the first session. What is open data all about? And what is the intention? What do we want to do? What should the end product be? And these kind of things. And of course, you get into all kinds of discussions. And these discussions are not always, sometimes you get a lot of feedback like, yeah, but this is too much work, so much work, why should we do that? Well, in the end, the main message is, if you organize your work well, it helps not only the people outside with your open data, but also it helps to make your own work more efficient. And you in a couple of months from now, do you still know how to run your script, what you did during your analysis, etc. So that's something that we started discussion with the researchers, and that was the second thing we did. Then to help them kind of create reproduction packages, because that's what we wanted as an end product, we created a template to help them kind of organize their results into a structure that you could put in a repository. And I'll show the reproduction package template later in the coming slides, and introductions of how to do it, how to apply a license to it, for example. And that was a bit difficult in COVID times, but we started those last year. We organized a number of data management workshops, in the topic to educate our researchers in how to use version control, how to organize your code in such a way that others can also use it, etc. So these are the kind of the pillars that we started with to prepare our institute to move towards open data. So open data may seem like a burden to people, and we got a lot of, some scientists were really almost angry at us, like, well, we need to do all these things. And again, if you organize it such, you also help yourself. So we really started focusing on how would you improve the way you work. The workshops really help with that. Tomorrow, by the way, we have a workshop on software development workflows, and we have 20 participants for our workshop. So people are really interested to improve the way they work. And that's a good entrance of making people more enthusiastic to move towards the open data. So 2 years ago, we didn't really have any reference to what a reproduction package or what published data should look like. And given that our institute has multiple fields in it, so it's earth science, different types of astronomy, experimental physics. So the question is, how do you create something, a guideline for all these researchers with all the different programming languages and all kind of tools that they use? How do you kind of make that into something that they can publish? So the main question that we asked them, if you make a reproduction package, what do you think a student would need to reproduce your results? And give us some number of examples. You give a link to where you can find the raw data. You provide the scripts that derive the products from the raw data. You provide the derived products themselves. So which images did you make, which spectra, and the scripts that do that. The analysis and optimization that you derive the results, Can you share something about that? The raw tables with the results, the scripts to recreate the figures that you put in the publication. By giving these examples, our researchers were kind of guided in what to put into the reproduction package and present them in a way that other people can kind of figure out what our researchers did for their publication. And of course, in addition, you provide also a README explaining how to use it. And this we put kind of in a basic template. So you have a data directory where you put the data products. You have a figures directory where you put the data and scripts that reproduce the figures in the paper. You have a directory with notebooks if people use Python in the first place, where you can put Jupyter notebooks to explain certain processes that you did in your analysis. And of course, the README file to explain what can you find where and how to run it. So this is what the README file looks like. It's a reproduction package for blah, 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 this paper. You need some software packages to run the scripts. Or, for example, if you use exonom-Newton data, you need the exonom-Newton science analysis software. Maybe you used AstroPy, etc. So you give the packages that you needed. You also have data prerequisites. So which data did you use in your analysis? You explain the package contents, etc. So you make a kind of a recipe like that scientists can fill in. Like, okay, these things should be in the README for others to be able to at least have an idea what I did in my paper. So this approach has a number of advantages. It offers high flexibility. So kind of all our fields within the institute can use this. Any type of data and software you can put in this template. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you can fit it in. In the README, you get already a bit of guidance what to put in this package. And this README file, I made it a markdown file. And if you upload it to the Zenodo archive, it shows very nicely as a preview when you upload it. So that gives a nice standard to look at your reproduction package once it's published. We put this in a Git repository, so it's also version controlled. So people can just kind of download it from Git and adapt it a bit to their liking. The disadvantages are, and well, this has also been discussed before the break, well, this is not machine readable and you don't really enforce the FAIR principle fully. You can upload in principle anything into the software, but there's no guarantee that your script that you upload can be run by someone else. This is not built into this template. And of course, you need to teach people how to make your software such that other people can more easily run it. But this is a problem that we haven't figured out anyway in the community, how to do software reproducibility really in a good way. You could think of Docker images. That has not been mentioned, but since Docker is a commercial platform and we don't know how long this will be an open platform, this is not an ideal thing. In principle, for people who don't know what a Docker image is Docker is a system where you can kind of put all the dependencies of your software in a package, and you can run that package in the Docker environment. So you need to install this Docker environment first, and then you can run images by others, and they have all the dependencies included. But of course, you depend on the Docker system to persist to have this working on the long term, and we're not sure of that. So this is what we came up with to start with. It's not perfect, but this is the first step towards getting people to share their data, share their software, and scripts to make the science at least better reproducible. At least you have access to the source code to see what people did. So this template is actually public. It's really simple, but I put it on the GitHub page. It's a CC0 license, so it's totally public domain, so you can do anything what you want with it. If you have suggestions of improvements, please put an issue on GitHub and tell me what do you think of it. I'm very open to suggestions. It's actually also uploaded to Zenodo. It's as you can see, it's a really small package, but you can cite it, download it if you're not on GitHub, also through Zenodo as well. Has this template been used? Yes, already a number of times. This is one example from a group more into the experimental physics department, and they very nicely made a reproduction package based on this template, and that's now on Zenodo. And I think we are now at about 10 reproduction packages published, and I will show later that you need to keep our scientists kind of active in this regard, because they do it once and then for the next paper they forget this is an issue. So you need to really repeat that this is a thing, and that reproduction packages is something that you should do for each paper that you publish. One idea for the next step for improvement is something which I actually discovered recently, is that you have also directory structure templates for all kinds of different projects, which is called, well, the package that manages the template is called Cookie Cutter, which is part of the Python environment. So what you can do is, there, for example, for data science, they have made a template with a source directory for your Python source files, a raw data directory, a process data directory, etc. Publications directory. And this is something that we get questions a lot by young people, like, yeah, but when I start a research project, how do I make a good directory structure? And actually, these templates suggest directory structures that you can just simply download, adapt a bit, and are a really good start to start your project in a structured way. So that's something to look at. Only having such a template doesn't ensure that you have good practices. So as a second thing, we are teaching scientists to start working in a more reproducible way. So create a clear project structure. This cookie cutter that I just showed is one of the things that we could use version control. And how do you document your software and your data sufficiently so that you can work more efficiently yourself, but also make it easier to transfer your knowledge to someone else. So how do we do that? We organize workshops. Most of them are based on the software and data carpentries. They are very good. So I would suggest for you to look into that. The topics are Git version control, introduction to Jupyter notebooks, and numeric Python. So how do you program in Python well, make functions, etc. Tomorrow we have the first instance of the software development workflow. So how do you collaborate on software, how you use GitHub and GitLab, so kind of the Git environment, to work together on a larger piece of software. Also with the intention, if you do it on GitHub, to make it in an open environment. So we had these topics in the past months, and more workshops are to come. And this initiative actually was also picked up by other NWO institutes, so sister institutes of SRON. So we will probably have these workshops also at their places. So the lessons that we learned in the past few years, and this slide kind of is more internally what was more difficult to do with our scientists is kind of motivate scientists to do a step extra, so more work than they would normally do. So why do you need to do all this work to make the data open? And they think also like, well, if I need to publish my data, it needs to be perfect. And in order to make it perfect, I need to invest a lot of time. So I'm not going to do that. So we try to convince them that just as a first step, don't aim for perfection. Good enough is good enough. Just get started, and we learn and perfect it as we go in the coming years. And that is working reasonably well. The workshops really help because that really motivates scientists to learn something new, learn how to make their work more efficient. And of course, having data stewards around, having local people to ask questions to really helps scientists a lot to answer, kind of the practical questions that they encounter in really making these reproduction packages. The second lessons are more like, how does this work in our environment? We are not alone as an institute. Our scientists are part of the astronomical community, for example, and there are also arguments coming from that side. We also already heard that some scientists are afraid of competition, and it depends really on the field. Our astronomers are a bit less afraid of that than our Earth scientists. How do you deal with that? We are pioneering in a sense, so their colleagues abroad do not have to do this. So why should I publish my software in order for someone else to do my thing, while I cannot use their thing? Well, that's in principle a valid concern. So we really need the community to adopt this more broadly to get rid of this difference in level, because at the moment we need to do something more than our colleagues need to do, and that's sometimes hard to explain. What also really helps, and that was also mentioned before the break, we really need to give credit to published data and software. So please cite things that we publish, and we need to keep the open data on the agenda to keep researchers motivated to do these things. Then some recommendation to the community as a whole. This is one of my last slides. And actually we're doing this in this meeting, discuss the general requirements for reproduction packages, for example. How do we do this? What is a standard? How do we review these reproduction packages? What quality standard they should be? That's still a question that is up in the air that we need to answer collectively. And kind of more specifically for publishers, I see that some journals already do this, but having in your process for publishing papers also a data availability statement or an encouragement to share the data when you publish, that's really a trigger for people to remember, like, oh yes, I need to do that. And maybe in the longer term, we can look at also including reproduction in the refereeing process. But the question of how to do is a burning one, and I also don't have the answers for that. So I want to close with a number of useful links that people can click on when these presentations get public, and some last end credits for the team that I work with at SRON to make this all possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jelle. Very nice talk. We already have a couple of questions. Let me go through them in order. So the first question was from Peter Shitluna. He asks, given the prevalence of Python and astronomy, would it be possible to automate steps like dependencies and adding machine readability at that step, and using the open standards developed there, like setup.py conventions for package installations?
Oh, yes, certainly. For Python, there are quite a number of tools available to make software packages interchangeable. Python is already quite a modular language, which helps a lot, kind of integrating also software modules from others into your own software, etc. The problem that we encounter is that not everybody in our groups works with Python. For many older scientists, this is not the language that they program in. They program in Fortran or in C, sometimes IDL. And then the question is, how do you do it with these languages? It's not always obvious.
Okay, thanks. We have another question from Meg Schwam. She asks, so open science is more, it is more work and it requires more dedicated time to get the product out. So she's asking, how do you get folks at your institution or an institution over this barrier in times when our attention is frequently divided into so many directions?
Yeah, that continues to be a challenge. I'm afraid I've not the golden answer to this. I can tell people a lot, like, look, if you organize your work better at the time of the refereeing process, when you need to go back and reproduce a figure, when you already have that, it becomes much easier. You can tell that to people, but I think they first need to experience it to really believe that. And we try to get them started to do these things, and let them have that experience, like, hey, if I use this script, or if I make some more comments in my script, it helps me 3 months later when I get the referee report. And I think that's the best advertisement that you can have, but you need to get people to do that first, and that's the difficult thing.
Thanks again, Jelle. So unfortunately, we will have more to the next talk, but I just wanted to mention that there are at least 3 more questions and comments that you should take a look at on Slack. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will. Thank you.